Yes, I'm here. Okay. Socially responsible society is something I've been working on since I retired from school. Go ahead, Igor.
Yes.
And my point is, this is not something very humble in its intent, because the United Nations and ISO are organizations talking by humankind on the very global level. And they launched the ISO 26000 only 2 years after the official recognition that we are, as humankind, in a global socio-economic crisis. So it's a tool against the crisis.
Who is ISO?
Huh?
What is ISO? What does ISO stand for? International?
International Standards Organization.
Yeah.
They normally make it what they are agreeing upon obligatory, but in this case it's not obligatory but advisory. And the point is, what is more costly, the current mistakes or social responsibility, which means a changed behavior? And if social responsibility is bound to solving the socioeconomic crisis of humankind, then it's an unavoidable necessity of humankind, and it's an innovation which is in process. What's that now?
Oh gosh, that's me. Sorry.
Yeah. So perhaps digitalization, which I know nothing about, can be one of the tools, but in any case, it can only be a tool because everything engineers produce are tools. Go ahead, please.
Mm-hmm.
And the crisis which caused the long debate about social responsibility to become something which is expressed in the ISO standards is the crisis. The crisis which comes from dominance of monopolies, which are bound to the neoliberal economics. And monopolies, as always in history, allow irresponsible, narrow-minded, one-sided decisions. So it's more short-term benefit for a small percentage, not even a percentage, less than a percentage of humankind. And which is not something which people can live on. So social responsibility could be, not unnecessarily is, a way out of this crisis. Igor, please.
Mm-hmm. Yes.
So this is a summary of what I wanted to tell so far. Social responsibility is one's responsibility for one's impact on society. It's not the responsibility of society, but the responsibility of humans and organizations for their impacts. So it should lead to a healthy society, and I would say by systemic behavior, not by one-sided one. So it expresses human values that should bring to an end the neoliberalism and war, as they are now the regulators of this society. Go ahead, please. All life is summarized in 7 contents in ISO 26000, which was launched 11 years ago, a good 10 years ago. Whatever you do fits into one of these 7 groups. So I will not discuss those groups, but what is below there, interdependence and holism. These are 2 notions which are exposed especially. Next one, please. They're exposed in this way. You have all 7 contents of life in a circle, and you have interdependence as a basis of that circle to survive, and you have holistic approach as the most important part of survival. This is quite common to us, huh? The holistic approach. And this is what brought me to the scene. A chance to work on holistic approach in an informal way, not only the one which we, the theoretical people of systems theory and cybernetics are doing. Here we have a very crucial informal way to make what we want happen. Go ahead. Yes.
Oh,
This is then supported in ISO 26000 by 7 principles. Accountability. And they make a difference between accountability and responsibility in the text. Accountability is, to me, like accountants have something which is between legal and more than legal obligation. Transparency, it's not that everything has to be transparent, but whatever is possible, it helps cooperation capacity. And it's supported by ethical behavior, which is briefly expressed by honesty, equality, integrity. And big difference comes next again from the current practice, not the one which Igor was talking about, but the one which is happening beside technology. Respect for stakeholder interests, not only shareholder, not only owner, but stakeholder, for the rule of law, for the international norms of behavior, and for human rights. So these are human basic attributes for individuals, for team, organizations, society, humankind. And it was a shocking, interesting to me last year when we published the book in Slovenian, which is called Introduction to the Political Economy of Socially Responsible Society. In Google, the word socially responsible society does not exist. And we are now having a discussion with another publisher for a book on the basis of socially responsible society, not only organizations, not only corporations as they are exposed so far. Next, please. Now, what comes to me in my mind when I'm trying to see how much of a chance do we have to develop a socially responsible society is the economic development viewpoint. Market is not something which has happened only recently. Market is many millennia old, but it's been changing and been changing with prevailing types of markets. The oldest one was incidental. Some people just happen to meet or come to fairs and exchange products and services. Then the producers came to prevail, so we talked as economists about producers' market, all the way to monopolies, to oligopolies, and an easy profit. Then the others see that and join, so we have many producers no longer leading monopolies, and so we come to what is called buyer's market, in which is hardly, there is profit, but it's not an easy one. And the next period brought state-supported buyer's market. And what we need now is a socially responsible buyer's market, which is fighting the neoliberalistic abuses which are ruining the humankind and nature. So we are actually, by social responsibility, fighting for human survival. And what Igor was talking about can be a tool for that or against that, whatever humans decide. So I wouldn't care to talk about the IA period as something which is defining what happens. Next one, please. After the Second World War, the changes were so quick as never before in history. The previous 4 phases I've been mentioning took centuries. Now we have decades. The supply market, the goods supply right after the war. This was everything which was important to people. Then the good price came to be the basis for competitiveness. No care for nature, no care for quality yet. Then in 60s, quality was added and some warnings came into the scene about nature. And then in 70s, choice became important for people to buy your things rather than with else's. More warning about nature. You have the full, the Greenland Commission and so on in those times. Then innovation came in through the demand for flexibility and later on for uniqueness. And now, after 2000, care for nature, for healthy nature, and providing the documents about corporate social responsibility is a new scene. But it's not technology, it's human behavior, it's human relations in these parts of the world where market is different from those areas like Amazon nature. So what is coming in the last decade is influence of care for corporate social responsibility and its influence over the business success. So we should come to an end of the crisis of affluence. What is crisis of affluence? Well, one of the world-renowned professors, Porter, defines 4 phases of the basis of competitiveness. Next, please. Owning natural resources. This was the oldest one, and it provided colonies, it provided wars, it limited social responsibility. Then investment came in as a second period in order to better use the resources. There was no longer limited social responsibility, but there was some charity added to it. Then the next period, as a basis of competitiveness, brought innovation. The numbers here, these pages numbers are from my book where this is described. Innovation and from innovation, good results come and affluence comes. And what they say is the crisis of affluence, because once you have everything you want, what you really actually need, not only want or wish, hard work is less needed. This is the period when the tourism started flourishing, when the drugs are very important in a very important market. And once affluence comes and the labor culture goes down, support is needed and society is in decline. In history, this has happened before too. The old country of Rome had this very historically well known. When they came to the affluence phase, the city of Rome fell from 1 million to only 10,000 inhabitants. So nowadays, the situation is in a similar danger. And what we had in the world is of the growing need for social responsibility for economic reasons. Because it's much cheaper to have honest partners. It's much cheaper to have workers who are not going on strike, which means you need to be honest with them. It's much cheaper to live without war. Right now, just before we met, read data. The cost of a patient of the current big disease of the world are in several $10,000, and in extreme case, over $1 million per single patient. And those who are having the hard part of the disease need, on average, 29 days in hospital, which means big cost. So social responsibility to accept all the measures and to take them seriously has very important economic reasons. And it means responsibility for influences over society, over everyone. more influential ones, more responsibilities needed, which means social responsibility is a non-technological innovation process for humans to survive, to get out of the current crisis. Next, please. And this process is sketched, the steps here. There are so many processes that in the last line I have the data from literature. 1 of 3,000 ideas gets through this process and become real innovation, which means new users benefit. Creation of the ideas is wonderful, but it's no more than invention, a promising one. Creation of suggestion from invention, which means it's easier to remember because it's noted. Then these ideas can be diffused, sold, given up, or put in an R&D process. And from the R&D process or formal or informal, potential innovations show up. They are usable, but they are not yet used. Many of them don't go on because others are found more important. But some of them are getting sold, and so they're diffused to others to work on. And some of them are successful in the market, so they become what is really called is full-right innovation. And then they are diffused like car used to be, like medical methods used to be, and used to be today again. They become new routines which provide new ideas, and the process goes on all the time in the modern society. Next, please. Which means, in combination with social responsibility issue, that the most important people, which are managers, are either democratic and make others have room for thinking and working on, or overburdened because they are not democratic enough. And this is the brief process which I'm sketching here. Mission, politics, strategy, tactic, task execution, monitoring results, intervention, and education and training preparation for the next course. So here, the social responsibility and the IA and the management come together for humans to survive. Next, please. And this is the set of preconditions for something to become innovation, including social responsibility, creativity, successful routine without routinism, which is love, to exert a lawful routine, invention, entrepreneurial spirit. This is what makes America different from Europe and Africa, because America was created by the most entrepreneurial person who had courage to go there. Entrepreneurship to make this happen, requisitorism to not oversee crucial points, management and leading to make this a reality, co-workers with whom they must happen. 85% of basis for the profit nowadays comes from co-workers' knowledge and engagement at work, which means we need also innovation-friendly values, culture, ethics, and norms. We need suppliers which support us. We need customers who press us. We have social environment which supports innovation and social responsibility. We need natural environment for us to survive. There are data around that only 8% of humankind nowadays can breathe a fresh air, which is not ill. And at the end, incidental, good luck. All of them, if one of them fails, the process fails. Be this responsibility as anything else. Thanks for worry and action.
Wow. I have been worried enough to start this club.
which is fine, Jason. That's why I joined as soon as you gave me the message.
I have two questions, maybe just one. what's your thinking about the role of or the function of religions in this process of forming social responsibility?
Religion is the oldest way of influence over values in the direction of social responsibility, unless abused for power. There are two sides of religion. You have the 8 commandments, which are a very good teaching. And then you have the history that in the name of Christian religion, Africa was destroyed, Native Americans were destroyed, east of the world was destroyed, and it brought to the insurrection of Islam. In Europe, we have from one religion 3 of them. So as soon as the religion is a tool of power, it's detrimental. As soon as it teaches the 10 commandments is very important. But obviously people cannot live without it and have hard times to make the distinction between the two parts of the story.
Well, it brings morals, the ones who should behave and do behave, but also the moral support for deviate and really developing those pathological behavior patterns, which I was talking about.
What goes along with that, let me just join to the Jason's issue. Actually, religion teaches us not to be too selfish. But I hardly can believe that customers can stop being selfish. All of us are producers and customers at the same time. So we cannot say social responsibility will destroy selfishness, because this is one of the extremely old, perhaps even one of the oldest attributes of human beings. But what is important is be selfish as buyer, as customer, either in the name of a company or in the name of a family or your own. Then demand the suppliers to be socially responsible. This is how things actually do work when they work.
I mean, before we all know that in history that religions, especially the monotheism, I mean the single God type of religions, provided as a source of morality. And but after Nietzsche declared that the God is there, and all the scientific revolution, the Renaissance and the Enlightenment, so more and more people kind of threw away religion. But if that is the case, and then we'll purely rely on human rationality. Now, my question is, can this new idea of social responsibility be built without a religious element, or it can build upon our rationality purely? I wonder, what is your view?
My view is that the rationality alone is irrational. Depending on rationality is very irrational.
Got you.
Because humans don't have only the brain, we also have values. We also have
but
feelings.
Where
emotions.
does value come from? I mean, what grows or fosters value? I mean, from our life living on the trees as monkeys, we sort of, in a self-organizing processes, developed this thing called a value system. And it's, boom, be highlighted by Moses' 10 Commandments. And it becomes so influential for such long time. But now, and also I forgot to ask you your definition of neoliberalism. When you use that term, what exactly do you mean? Neoliberalism. Is that something
Neoliberalism is
moving away
abuse.
from the traditional value?
It's a result of chances for monopolism, which is abusing, and this is what the humans depend on today. There is a research which Swiss people have made, published in 2011, that studied 30 million companies on their interdependence. And they found out that in 30 million companies, less than 50 are controlling 80% of the products. 80%, which is monopolistic situation. And it's a few people who do control of that. And this is abuse of market and abuse of democracy, what I mean when I say neoliberalistic practice. Unfortunate situation of nowadays, which causes also that nowadays we have $1 per person for the organization which was now the last one to receive so far the Nobel Prize for Peace. And we have daily market of weapons beyond $5 billion. And most of those come from the countries which are the permanent members of the Security Council of the United Nations. So we have a terrible abuse, which we are living now, and we are actually living on the brink of warfare rather than welfare.
I think you're very pessimistic, sir. I don't feel attracted to these large questions and to religion and to whatever. What I find a bit interesting is as soon as you boil it down to concrete questions, for example, if I take Jason's question about values, I would be interested in under what conditions are people prepared for value change? When does value change happen? And then we can see certain instances, for example, the Russian Revolution, or maybe even Slovenia in the 1980s or in the 1990s. Or, how do processes of value change? We can make it concrete and we can see. And I think that's much more useful than looking at behavior, because people will be greedy.
May I throw in a comment, please? First of all, thank you, Matjaz, for this very clear presentation of the problem or the problems and the desirable solutions. The question is how we get there. Now, I advocate education in the broadest sense, in that everyone on the planet, bit by bit, should come to understand what we are doing to our home, our ecosystems, and also they need to be educated about where they stand with respect to each other as social beings. And we don't need necessarily to advocate religious teachings in here, but they are opposite in some ways. I note, for example, that there's something called the Golden Rule, which is practiced by most of the world's faith. That's, you know, do unto others as you'd have them do unto you. One big exception is Islam, where the Golden Rule only applies to fellow Muslims. And that is absolutely clear. People pass over that. Also note from Confucianism, where Confucius teaches an obligation to extend goodwill to all people and to be on the side of the lowly, as he puts it. He also notes he has yet to meet anyone who is capable of being of goodwill all day long. So although we've got the sort of socio-cultural apparatus to help us understand our situations and understand the moral imperatives, as it were, we are still biological creatures, and we are subject to the wrong kind of passions and pathologies. But I still advocate a proper education which reveals our responsibilities towards our world and towards each other. And as Heinz von Förster would frequently say, if person A is better off, then person B is better off. We really have to worry about everyone on the planet. And I'd just like to finish by saying, thank you, Greta Thunberg, for showing an instance of how a butterfly in outer Mongolia can bring a major change into a complex self-organizing system. So just one example. Thank you.
There's another example, the people who live in the forests of Amazonia. They don't need the modern technology. They don't need the modern way of life, but they have their own religion which teaches them the basic rules. But that's not enough.
Well, Matjaz, I appreciate what you say. It's a very romantic idea. I mean, amongst indigenous people, some of these tribes are only a few hundred people in size, just large enough to maintain themselves breeding wise, but they fight with each other. They eat it. You know, I mean, it's not a paradise. But I appreciate what you're saying, that there are communities, cultures who live much more closely in tune with the world around them and their fellow man than what most people do in the West. And this is well illustrated by the usual tropes about Europeans colonizing North